Well, we had a little spit of rain yesterday. Helped a little bit, but we could use a whole lot more, I'm sure. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where you felt like your back was just up against a wall and you were just out of options? And you just didn't really have any way of figuring any way out of it? Well, what we're going to look at today is when the Israelites found themselves in the same situation. And we're going to try and take a look at that in light of our own lives and see what we can find there to apply to us today. And we do have a little bit of a long section that we're going to read, but it's a very familiar section. But I believe there's something very important to be found there that we can apply today with everything going on in our lives as we face the daily struggles that come on a daily basis. And so let's pick up at Exodus 14 at verse 10 where we read, "As Pharaoh approached, the Israelites looked up and there were the Egyptians marching after them. They were terrified and cried out to the Lord. They said to Moses, 'Was it because there were no graves in Egypt that you brought us to the desert to die? What have you done to us by bringing us out of Egypt? Didn't we say to you in Egypt, leave us alone, let us serve the Egyptians? It would have been better for us to serve the Egyptians than to die in the desert.' Moses answered the people, 'Do not be afraid. Stand firm, and you will see the deliverance the Lord will bring you today. The Egyptians you see today you will never see again. The Lord will fight for you. You need only to be still.' Then the Lord said to Moses, 'Why are you crying out to me? Tell the Israelites to move on. Raise your staff and stretch out your hand over the sea to divide the water so that the Israelites can go through the sea on dry ground. I will harden the hearts of the Egyptians so that they will go in after them. And I will gain glory through Pharaoh and all his army, through his chariots and his horsemen. The Egyptians will know that I am the Lord when I gain glory through Pharaoh, his chariots, and his horsemen.' Then the angel of God who had been traveling in front of Israel's army withdrew and went behind them. The pillar of cloud also moved from in front and stood behind them, coming between the armies of Egypt and Israel. Throughout the night the cloud brought darkness to one side and light to the other side, so neither went near the other all night long. Then Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and all that night the Lord drove the sea back with a strong east wind and turned it into dry land. The waters were divided, and the Israelites went through the sea on dry ground, with a wall of water on their right and on their left. The Egyptians pursued them, and all Pharaoh's horses and chariots and horsemen followed them into the sea. During the last watch of the night, the Lord looked down from the pillar of fire and cloud at the Egyptian army and threw it into confusion. He jammed the wheels of their chariots so that they had difficulty driving. And the Egyptians said, 'Let's get away from the Israelites. The Lord is fighting for them against Egypt.' Then the Lord said to Moses, 'Stretch out your hand over the sea so that the waters may flow back over the Egyptians and their chariots and horsemen.' Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and at daybreak the sea went back to its place. The Egyptians were fleeing toward it, and the Lord swept them into the sea. The water flowed back and covered the chariots and horsemen, the entire army of Pharaoh that had followed the Israelites into the sea. Not one of them survived, but the Israelites went through the sea on dry ground, with a wall of water on their right and on their left. That day, the Lord saved Israel from the hands of the Egyptians, and Israel saw the Egyptians lying dead on the shore. And when the Israelites saw the mighty hand of the Lord displayed against the Egyptians, the people feared the Lord and put their trust in him and in Moses, his servant." So as we look at what's taking place and has taken place so far, is the Israelites have left Egypt, and God didn't lead them according to the normal route of travel that would take place to get from Egypt into the area known as the Promised Land. He led them out of the way, and the Scripture tells us so that they would avoid conflict, avoid things that they weren't ready for. And so In the process of doing this, he has led them around, avoiding the obstacles, to a place that is referred to as a wadi. This is basically an area that opens up out into the sea and is surrounded typically by mountains. So there's basically one way in and one way out. And that's it. There's no escape. And that's the type of situation they found themselves in. And suddenly they realize the Egyptians are coming. They've changed their minds, they've had a change of hearts, and now they are coming after them, and the people are panicking. I mean, put yourself in their situation. They're backed up against the wall. Well, actually against the ocean, or the sea, what the ocean. They've got no place to go. They've got no options. They were being led around different obstacles because they're not warriors yet. They're not ready to fight, and here comes an army. And they're unarmed. And so they're crying out to Moses, why didn't you just let us serve the Egyptians? At least we would still be alive. They're going to come and kill us. And notice what Moses tells them. He says, if you would, you need only be still. I like that, especially when we begin to understand what it means in the original text. You see, the sea parted, the Egyptians were restrained, and yes, the Israelites crossed safely. The Egyptians were destroyed, and the Israelites went through and not around the sea. So what did Moses mean by telling them they need only be still before all of this took place? Did he mean to stand still and do nothing? Did he mean just stand still and watch? What did he mean? What is it that is interpreted, you need only to be still? He was telling them, if you would, be calm. He wasn't telling them just to stand and do nothing. He was saying, calm down. It's going to be okay. Don't get your feathers ruffled. Don't get upset. Be calm. Be at peace. God's got this. They needed to stop panicking and let God handle the situation. And that seems to be one of the things that they were very good at, is panic. If you follow what took place that throughout the Exodus period, they were constantly panicking about something. But Moses tells them here at this big major point, toward the beginning of the Exodus and heading towards the Promised Land, be still. Calm down. Stop panicking. God is in control. And I'm sure Moses is probably amazed because they've just come out of a situation where they've watched the plagues on Egypt. They should have known after those plagues on Egypt and Egypt driving them out that God was in control. I don't know, maybe they figured God changed his mind or something and was letting the Egyptians come. But for whatever reason, they saw them coming and immediately they went into panic mode, and Moses says, calm down. Get quiet. And watch what God is going to do. He's going to take care of this. You see, they didn't know God had led them into that precarious situation because he was going to destroy the Egyptian army, and in the process, if you would, show the Israelites that he was indeed with them and going to protect them. They were probably thinking Moses was some kind of a stupid leader who had no clue what he was doing. Now he's got us trapped. But God had deliberately led them there to a situation to where they had no choice but to trust him. And Moses tells them, be still. Calm down. They just needed to remain calm. And when the time came, then they would need to move. In other words, calm down and be ready to do what God tells you to do when he tells you to do it. And watch as God works on your behalf. See, Exodus and Deuteronomy show us that the Israelites constantly struggled with their faith. And over again, God overcame the obstacles they faced for them to help them rediscover their faith. I mean, think about it. In Egypt, they lived under the influence there that there were multiple gods who used people as pawns, and that each one was a god over a specific part of the universe. They believed in the god of the river, the god of the stars, the god of the trees, the god of the hills, the god of the valleys, and they just had this myriad of gods. And for 400 years, that's what they've been surrounded with. That's what they've been indoctrinated with, as well as still being taught the God of their fathers. And so throughout everything going on, you can imagine that they have that influence that is still sticking with them, wondering if their God is more powerful than the other gods, rather than understanding that He is the only God. And so they've got that background, that 400-year background of that. And then Moses arrives and tells them that the God of their fathers is the one true God, and that He is in control of everything. And after 400 years of being surrounded by and indoctrinated by the pagan Egyptian religion, more than likely, if you would, they were struggling with wholeheartedly putting their faith in one God that created and ruled everything, rather than believing in multiple gods. But time and time again, He showed them that He, the great I Am, was who He says He is, and that He really was going to watch over them and protect them and get them where He was taking them. And each time they faced an obstacle, it was an opportunity to rediscover their faith and deepen their trust in God. Of course, we know the stories. They constantly whined and panicked, didn't they? Always griping about something. Something always wasn't good enough. Something was always causing a problem. Can't do this, can't do that. They even griped and whined when He finally got them to the promised land and said, go take it. Said, oh, but we can't. The Israelites were the masters of whine, the masters of grump. Sometimes I wonder why God didn't go ahead and do like He threatened to do and get rid of them all and go ahead and make a new nation out of Moses. But one of the things that they learned over and over again throughout the entire time, until they eventually did reach the promised land, even after the 40 years in the wilderness and they had to come back to the promised land, they learned that if you would, God always protected and provided. Always. That everything that needed to be taken care of was taken care of. God saw to it. Even to the extent that their clothes didn't even wear out. Wow, think about that. Wouldn't that be great? No more taking the wives shopping for clothes. Although Nina doesn't really like shopping for clothes that much. She didn't really like shopping at all. So I'm blessed. But everything they needed taken care of was taken care of. And in spite of that fact, they were always ungrateful. Does that sound like a people today? Does that sound like this nation today? We have been so overwhelmingly blessed, and yet why are we in the middle of some of the struggles we've got? They're not grateful for what they've been given. God has provided for us in this nation over and over again. And yet we find ourselves facing struggles because people are ungrateful. But let's get a little bit more personal about it. Let's set the picture of the nation aside, and let's kind of look at this with our own individual lives. Let's face it. We have obstacles in our lives that we come up against. And some of the obstacles, God moves out of the way for us. We see it coming, we're up against it, and we go to the Lord in prayer, and He moves it out of the way. But then there are other times that God takes us around the obstacles and leads us in a path to avoid them altogether. I mean, think about it. How many times in your life have you found yourself kind of looking back over things and realized that He helped you avoid something, and you didn't even realize it at the time? But you look back and you discover just how close you came to having to deal with something very difficult, only to have God steer you in a different direction so you didn't have to deal with it at all, and helped you to avoid it. In the same way, He took the Israelites all around the long route so that they wouldn't have to go into battle and fight people along the way most of the time. But then there are others that we have to go through. There are some obstacles that we come up against, and we go to the Lord in prayer, and He doesn't move them. He says, no, you need to go through this one. And we feel like the Israelites at that wadi, backed up against the sea with no way out. And God is wanting us to not panic. He wants us to be calm and let Him work as He takes us through whatever He's brought us up against. You see, if you would, each obstacle is an opportunity to rediscover God. I think there's a lot of times that we get going in our life and things get moving along fairly smooth, and we have a tendency to kind of drift a little bit away from God because we're not having to lean on Him quite so much. We seem to be able to handle things on our own. Things are going fairly smoothly. And I think He allows these obstacles to come. Sometimes they're just little obstacles. Sometimes they're huge obstacles. But He allows them to come to help us get redirected, refocused, and rediscover Him and what He's been doing in our lives all along. You see, each time you face an obstacle or challenge or fear in your life, God is making a way for you to rediscover His love, helping you to realize just how much He does love you, enough to either take you around the obstacles or through the obstacles or move them out of the way. He's displaying His love over and over again. And it's an opportunity to rediscover that love firsthand. And each time you face an obstacle or challenge or fear in your life, God is making a way for you to rediscover His power. I mean, how many times do any of us as individuals find ourselves in a situation facing something that when we finally get through it or around it or it's moved out of the way, we realize just how much God was at work, and we realize the magnitude of His power in that situation. I mean, let's face it. Let's bring it a little bit closer home. Van Horns. How in the world could Sharon and those boys not possibly have COVID-19? Because when Milton was at home, they were coughed all over. The boys were up in his lap all the time. And I said Mason even ate after him because he found food on the floor and stuff. How could they not have COVID-19 if the power of God was not present? Working. Answering prayers, removing the obstacle. Yeah, Milton's having to go through it, but for the rest of the family, at this point, he's removed it. The power of God in our daily lives, sometimes we don't recognize it when it's right there in front of us. Each time you face an obstacle or challenge or fear in your life, God is making a way for you to rediscover His compassion. Calm down. I've got this. I'll take care of it for you. Let me deal with it. I know it's tough. I know you're struggling. I know you're hurting. Let me handle it. Let me get you through it. How many times do we find ourselves benefiting from His compassion in our lives? Each time you face an obstacle or challenge or fear in your life, God is making a way for you to rediscover His faithfulness. His promise that He would always be there. I mean, let's face it, there are times we feel like maybe He's not there. I think those times are because He kind of is standing there, but He's not really doing something at the moment because He wants us to really, really want Him there. And then we find out as He steps in that He's always been there. He's just been waiting for us to get our priorities right because of the situation. And when we finally get our priorities right, He said, now I'll handle it. It accomplished what I wanted. Now I'll take care of it. I'm always here. I'm not going to leave you alone. I mean, it was the psalmist who said, where can I flee from your presence? If I go to the heights, if I go to the depths, if I go to the east, to the west, you're everywhere I go. His faithfulness, always present in our lives, always there protecting, always there trying to guide. I say trying because so much of the time we don't pay attention to Him. But always there. Always having our well-being as the motive for His actions. Each time you face an obstacle or challenge or fear in your life, God is making a way for you to rediscover His peace. I think that is something that when you put all of these together, you begin to realize that regardless of what is going on in our lives, we can have peace. As the psalmist wrote, be still and know that I am God, and I will be exalted among the nations. Be still. Be calm. Be at peace. Because I am God. I love you. I'm watching out for you. I'm protecting you. I'm always going to be there. Be at peace. Be calm. Be still. I'm here. No matter the situation, no matter the problem, no matter what is going on in our life, no matter how difficult it may seem, if you would, God will make a way. He'll either remove it, take us around it, or take us through it. He will make a way. He will always be there. He will not abandon us. He will make a way because of His love, because of His power, because of His compassion and His faithfulness. So often, we find ourselves in situations that seem hopeless. And it seems like we blink and God's made a way. Just when we're about ready to give up, God makes a way. And many times He even waits for us to give up and stop trying to deal with it on our own. It's almost as He's like He's standing there and He's saying, are you ready to let me handle this yet? When are you going to give up and let me make a way? But what do we have a tendency to do? Oh, we want to fix things and make things happen ourselves, don't we? We like to trust in our own power. We like to trust in our own abilities, and there are a lot of times we find out that, guess what? We can't do it. And God's there waiting to make a way. Everything seemed hopeless for the Israelites. They were trapped, no visible means of escape, and the Egyptians were coming. But God parted the sea and made a way. You would. They only needed to trust Him and walked through the sea that had been parted for them. And the way he made to save the Israelites from the Egyptians was also the Egyptians' doom. He used his provision for their escape as the means by which he was going to bring their end. And just as God made a way for the Israelites to escape the Egyptians and be free, he made a way for us to escape the bonds of sin and be free when he sent his Son to die on the cross and shed his blood so that we could be set free. And just like the Israelites, we need only to trust him and walk through the way he has provided by, if you would, obeying the gospel message. He's made a way. And just as he made a way for the Egyptians through the sea that sealed the Egyptians' doom, if you would, the death, burial, and resurrection of his Son sealed Satan's doom. That is one of the incredible things about when God makes a way for his people. He also uses that as the means by which he puts an end to those who oppose him. We talked about the Babylonians last week. He used them to straighten out the Israelites, but in the same way, he was using what they were doing against them because ultimately they would be punished for their own actions. God made a way to set us free, and in the process, sealed Satan's fate. As we face the daily challenges of our lives, as we face those obstacles that come at us sometimes multiple times during the day, use them to rediscover God, to strengthen your faith, to allow him to show you his power, his love, his faithfulness, his peace. When all seems hopeless, be still. Be calm. And let God provide the way. You got something going on in your life today that you need to be still and let him take control of? Would you do that? Would you use that to rediscover him? Whatever decisions you may have today, would you make those decisions